Millionaire sat on a bench with a $300 takeout meal. Across the park, a girl in torn clothes watched him, barefoot, bruised, barely 9 years old. She shuffled over slowly. Everyone turned to stare. Then she whispered, "Can I eat with you?" And what the millionaire did next shocked even himself. Jacob Harlan wasn't just any millionaire. He was the founder of Harlan Innovations, a tech giant with 12 U.S. patents, a $160 million valuation, and a reputation as a brilliant but distant mind. Most saw him on magazine covers. Few saw him as human. Tags: hashtag millionaire with a heart, hashtag tech giant, hashtag street angel. Disclaimer: this story is a dramatized emotional narrative for entertainment, inspired by real struggles and true kindness. That fall afternoon, Jacob wasn't wearing a suit. He sat alone in Central Park, in a hoodie and jeans, trying to disappear behind dark glasses. He had just walked out of a high-stakes investor meeting and wanted silence more than anything. He peeled open a gourmet bento box: Wagyu beef, black truffle salad, edible gold leaf. A symbol of success that didn't taste like peace. That's when he felt it. Eyes on him. He looked up. A little girl stood under a tree, staring. Her clothes didn't fit. Her hair was matted. But her eyes had stories that screamed louder than sirens. She inched forward. People near him stiffened. A woman whispered, "Where are her parents?" Another muttered, "Keep walking, kid." But the girl didn't flinch. She stopped 2 feet from him. Then, in the tiniest voice, she said, "Can I eat with you?" Jacob blinked. The world froze. A man next to him chuckled under his breath. "Seriously? Don't get your shoes dirty, Harlan." Jacob's throat tightened. He looked at the girl. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She just stood there, waiting. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She nodded. Not just hungry, lonely too. And Jacob, the man who had built empires, cracked AI codes, and fired 50 people in a single week, handed her his entire meal. But she didn't take it. "I said eat with you, not from you." The moment hit him like it. Jacob moved over on the bench. "Then sit, let's eat." And in that instant, a billionaire and a homeless child began to break bread, and something deeper than food was shared. But what came next changed his entire life. Jacob had shared his meal with the little girl, but she gave him something back he hadn't felt in years: presence. She chewed slowly, savoring each bite like it was gold. No complaints, no rush, just silence. A silence so heavy, it started to chip at the walls around Jacob's heart. "What's your name?" he asked. She paused. "People call me Peanut." "Peanut," he smiled for the first time in weeks. She nodded. "Because I'm small, I guess. What's yours?" He hesitated. "Jake." It was a lie. He didn't want to be Jacob Harlan right now. Not the millionaire. Not the CEO. Not the headline. Just Jake. She didn't ask for more. She didn't care if he owned a billion-dollar tech firm or a hot dog cart. That's what shook him. They ate in silence, but Jacob couldn't stop looking at her. She had bruises on her forearms. Her shoes were gone. And yet, her eyes were full of fight. "You live around here?" he asked. She pointed behind her. "Kinda. There's a vent behind the church that blows warm air. I sleep there when it doesn't rain." Jacob swallowed hard. His chest felt tight. "How long?" "Since Mama went to sleep and didn't wake up. Then the man in the red truck didn't want me." The world tilted. Jacob stared at her, stunned, and in a whisper he didn't expect to say out loud, he replied, "I lost my daughter too." Peanut turned toward him sharply. "What was her name?" "Emily," he said, voice cracking. Peanut's lip trembled. "That's a pretty name." Jacob had never said her name in public since the accident. Not once. The nanny had forgotten to strap the car seat. Emily was 3. By the time Jacob got to the hospital, she was already gone. That day his heart died quietly inside him, and he buried it under meetings, mergers, and million-dollar launches. But now, this barefoot stranger, this Peanut, had pulled it out of him like it was nothing. "You remind me of her," Jacob said. Peanut looked up, surprised. "Because I'm small?" "No, because you're brave." She grinned, the biggest, brightest smile he had ever seen. It didn't belong on someone who slept near air vents. Jacob looked around. People were still watching, judging. But for the first time, he didn't care. He looked her in the eye and asked, "Do you want to go home with me tonight?" Peanut didn't blink. "Will there be pancakes?" Jacob laughed. "There can be." She nodded like it was a contract. Then yes. And just like that, a girl who owned nothing but hope, and a man who had everything but peace, began walking away from the bench. Together. But Jacob had no idea. The real storm hadn't even started yet. By the next morning, Peanut was singing in his penthouse kitchen. Jacob watched her flip pancakes with both hands and a butter knife. She had never used a stove before, but you'd think she was born in a diner. She wasn't just surviving now. She was glowing. And Jacob, he was scared. Because for the first time since losing Emily, he let someone in. And it wasn't a business partner or a therapist or a woman with a designer smile. It was a homeless 9-year-old with a busted sneaker and a soul too big for her tiny body. But fairy tales don't last. Not in real life. 3 days later, Child Protective Services came knocking. Someone in the building had seen her, called it in. Suspicious child, possible kidnapping, wealthy man with unknown girl. Jacob tried to explain. He told them about the bench, the food, her sleeping behind the church, but it didn't matter. Peanut was taken. Her scream as they dragged her out of the penthouse, it ripped something alive out of Jacob's chest. "You promised," she shouted through tears. And Jacob, the man who never failed a deal, stood frozen. He had no rights, no papers, no say. But what he had was fire. 2 weeks later, in court, Jacob Harland sat before a judge in a full courtroom of reporters, cameras, and lawyers. Peanut was there, wearing a donated dress, her hair brushed, eyes dimmed. The judge said, "Mr. Harland, you're a public figure, a millionaire. This girl is a ward of the state. Why fight for her?" Jacob stood, and with a shaking voice, he said, "Because no one fought for my daughter. Because when Emily died, I didn't protect her. Because I thought money would numb the grief. But this little girl reminded me what it feels like to be alive again. And if I let her go now, I'll lose another daughter. And I can't survive that twice." Silence. Not a breath in the room. Then Peanut raised her hand. "Can I say something?" she asked. The judge nodded. She walked to the front. Small, brave, she pointed at Jacob and said, "He's the only person who looked at me like I mattered. Not like a problem, not like trash. Like a daughter. And if you take him away from me, you'll make me homeless again." 1 week later, Peanut walked into the penthouse with an official custody certificate in her tiny hands. Jacob was waiting. No suit, no tie, just a dad. And on the table, a stack of pancakes with a note that read, "Welcome home."